It's late into 2015. We have sudden mass layoffs, an angry mob of employees, and a co-founder held hostage for nearly 48 hours. Just months earlier, this startup had raised millions in funding from top-tier VCs. It was expanding aggressively across cities, hiring at scale, and promising operational excellence. This company was being celebrated as the future of urban convenience. Its name, TinyOwl. Welcome to the very first episode of The Flop Side, the podcast where we uncover the stories of Indian startups that once soared only to come crashing down. I'm your host, Priyanka, and in today's episode, I'll be taking you back to when the food tech industry was just heating up. Venture capital was flowing fast, and a small Mumbai-based startup called TinyOwl was poised to become the next big thing. Their promise was simple: 30-minute delivery. And with a clean app, ambitious founders, and millions in funding, they looked unstoppable. But this episode is not about a bad idea. Because while food delivery went on to become a multi-billion-dollar industry in India, TinyOwl had faded into acquisition footnotes and restructuring announcements. Today, when we think of Indian food delivery, we think of the giants. But before these giants consolidated power, there were several casualties. TinyOwl was one of the earliest, and its story tells us some uncomfortable truths about how startups are built and how quickly momentum can turn into fragility. Act 1. The Spark. So, let's get into the details. In early 2014, 5 graduates from IIT Bombay set out to do something deceptively simple: fix how the country ordered food. At the center of that ambition was Harshvardhan Mandad, flanked by co-founders Gaurav Chaudhary, Saurabh Goyal, Shikhar Paliwal, and Tanuj Khandelwal, a team that combined engineering depth with a product-first sensibility. Their venture, TinyOwl, wasn't chasing novelty, it was chasing inevitability, because the timing was almost too perfect. At that point, India was going through a huge transformation. Smartphone users had increased nearly fourfold, from around 37 million in 2012 to over 141 million in just 2 years. This, in tandem with growing 3G penetration, cheaper internet, and rising income coupled with lifestyle changes, resulted in India's online food delivery market growing at an exciting rate of 40% to hit a valuation of approximately INR 350 crores in 2014. Oh, and market projections aside, there was a huge competitive vacuum in the market. Zomato, founded in 2010, was still focused on menu aggregation and restaurant listings. Swiggy hadn't yet entered the arena. Foodpanda, despite its early lead, was restricted to the restaurants that already had their own delivery network in place. No company could claim even the slightest bit of authority in delivery logistics, the hardest, most critical layer of this sector. In other words, the market wasn't just exploding, it was structurally incomplete, thus setting the stage for one of the first mobile-only food delivery platform in India. TinyOwl's mission was clear: making food delivery not just accessible, but also convenient and enjoyable. And that's exactly what they managed to achieve. A beautiful minimalist app where you could order from local restaurants without the hassle of calling in or browsing through clunky websites. Ordering food became less of a transaction and more of an interaction. Furthermore, they recognized the importance of timely delivery. People didn't just want to be able to order, they wanted their food right away. And just like that, hyperlocal became TinyOwl's buzzword. As Mandad would later put it in an interview with Your Story,
"Of course, hyperlocal is a very key part. Food is such. We have tie-ups with thousands of restaurants in Mumbai and aim to give our customers the best experience with food discovery and ordering."
At their core, TinyOwl was going to operate on a commission-based structure. It was pretty straightforward. Restaurants would sign up to TinyOwl's platform to get access to an ever-increasing customer base, while TinyOwl would get a cut of every transaction from the restaurant. For the customers, it was completely free. And as is typically done, efforts would be made to attract as many as possible through discounts, offers, referrals, etc. They knew volume wasn't a byproduct of growth. It was the engine. Backed by this clarity, TinyOwl moved fast. Their first raise in August 2014 was a seed round of INR 6 crores from angel investors Deep Ubhi and Sandeep Tandon, as reported by Business Standard. It was using this capital they secured their spot in the Mumbai market with a focused geographic strategy and aggressive restaurant onboarding. The hype was real. Within months, traction turned into momentum. Their main customer base, tech-savvy young professionals and students, responded almost immediately to the seamless mobile experience and extensive collection of restaurants. By December 2014, TinyOwl had achieved impressive early metrics, claiming to have onboarded over 1,000 restaurants and processed over 2,000 orders daily in Mumbai. More importantly, they had managed to attract the attention of two key investors, Sequoia Capital and Nexus Venture Partners, who came in with the crucial 20 crore rupees Series A funding, validating TinyOwl's trajectory so far. This showed the world that TinyOwl was only gearing up for the next phase of its meteoric rise.
Act 2. The Illusion. By now, nearly a year in, it was clear TinyOwl wasn't meant to be just another app, and the potential didn't go unnoticed, as they managed to score a significantly larger Series B round in February 2015, just 2 months after closing the Series A. This was led by Matrix Ventures, with Sequoia and Nexus doubling down on their bets, bringing in a total of INR 100 crores. There was also participation from Snapdeal co-founders Kunal Bal and Rohit Bansal as individual investors. This basically signaled one thing. Investors were lining up to board the gravy train, and sentiments across the market indicated significant value creation in the online food delivery sector. Rishi Navani, managing director at Matrix India, even said,
"We believe in the TinyOwl team's vision, their product, and their ability to execute at a pan-India level, and are excited to partner with them on their journey to create a large company."
Early 2015 marked unprecedented investment and competition in the food delivery market. In an attempt to consolidate their position, Foodpanda had acquired their rival, Just Eat India, just 3 months after their acquisition of another rival, Tasty Khana, in November 2014. Zomato had also just announced its venture into the food delivery space, allocating 300 crores capital for development. Swiggy, launched in August 2014, was receiving seed funding of approximately 16 crores from notable investors. What this meant was simple. If you had a compelling product, capital would follow, and for TinyOwl, the coffers were filling up quickly. This influx of funding marked a critical inflection point for the company because there was an explicit mandate that came with it to expand across the nation. And just like that, everyone at TinyOwl had a new buzzword imprinted in their minds: hypergrowth. Armed with 100 crores, they put together an extremely aggressive playbook to map out their hypergrowth strategy. Their next goal was already in the horizon: a national footprint spanning 50 cities. But before the vision could materialize, TinyOwl set itself a much more immediate and incredibly aggressive goal: to launch in India's top metros by mid-2015. That gave them realistically 6 months, in fact less than 6 months, to go from their current momentum in one city, that is Mumbai, to building a compelling presence across the country's other equally competitive markets. This Herculean task included setting office spaces, hiring large local teams, building delivery infrastructure, rapid restaurant onboarding, aggressive marketing, customer acquisition, and so much more. The to-do list was long and extremely taxing. All this simultaneously across 11 cities. It was madness, but surely very achievable according to the TinyOwl team. Also, they were just so certain that they absolutely had to establish dominance in all these individual cities before their competitors could. Mandad acknowledged both the growth and the competition in a company-wide memo stating,
"I'm not afraid, and you should not be. We have to focus on building a great product which gives best customer experience and parallelly expand to other geographies at lightning speed."
The only way to achieve that kind of scale was burning capital, aggressively, and on all fronts. And with that level of cash burn, TinyOwl's runway was starting to get smaller and smaller, which was going to be a huge problem.
Act 3. The Crack.
In an attempt to do it all, TinyOwl kept racking up expenses. Deep discounts to customers meant extremely high acquisition costs. Managing their own delivery fleet required major investment, and marketing spends drained their reserves. TinyOwl seemed to be drowning in its supposed success as they burned cash at warp speed. In fact, it was reported that the cash burn had reached up to 8 to 10 crores a month. Something had to be done, and the very obvious step was restructuring. Thus began the slew of layoffs, with around 300 employees let go by September 2015. There was an attempt to slow the bleeding in October with bridge funding of 50 crores from existing investors. But it wasn't just the financial strain. There was also a major gap in leadership that was becoming harder to ignore. All 5 founders came with extensive technical prowess in product and engineering, but what the moment demanded was sharp, battle-tested operational leadership. Someone who could tackle all the challenges that had piled up. Delivery fleets were mismanaged, operation teams were undertrained. In some cases, even restaurant partners were gaming the system with fraudulent practices. It was clear that the growth strategy hadn't penetrated into the deepest levels of infrastructure requirements. The team wasn't prepared for the hot, steaming pile of problems that surprisingly investors seem to have chalked off to growing pains typical to such rapid expansions. Their belief was that this lifeline would give TinyOwl about 12 months of runway to fill the cracks by hiring experienced talent, improving infrastructure, and overall bettering the consumer experience. Instead, leadership completely misunderstood and misused their safety net on sustaining their current growth. This led to another round of layoffs announced in November and is what incited the infamous hostage crisis in Pune. On the 3rd of November 2015, Gaurav Chaudhary and the other co-founders had traveled to the TinyOwl offices in 4 major cities: Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Delhi. Their motive was clear: offer post-dated checks and resignation letters to all the laid-off employees. However, in Pune, the situation got out of control. Employees were outraged. Some, hired only recently, were let go without much clarity, the reason being restructuring to make business viable. But with the Series C funding finalized just a month back, employees felt betrayed yet again by the sudden layoffs. Furthermore, there were claims that some of the employees laid off in the previous round hadn't yet received their full and final payments. Trust was depleted, and employees refused to release Gaurav Chaudhary from the Pune office till they received the payment they were due. Finally, after more than 36 hours of endless negotiations and intervention from local police and politicians, he was let go. But in the meantime, this had already become national news, and TinyOwl was under the scrutiny of not just the media, but also customers, investors, and potential employees. Basically, extensive damage had been done, and it seemed to be irreparable. Concurrently, there was also a shift in the market. Investors became skeptical as multiple well-funded startups were in hot waters. This gravely impacted the company's plans for a Series D in early 2016. While Sequoia and Matrix remained supportive, bringing on any new names seemed impossible for the cash-hungry startup. With funding drying up, TinyOwl had little choice but to pull back. They began cutting losses, narrowing their focus to a handful key cities where profitability felt within reach and where the brand could still be salvaged. Logistics, once core to their promise, was partially outsourced to partners like Roadrunner, a clear attempt to rein in one of their biggest cost centers. In many ways, this was a moment of reckoning. Growth was no longer the priority, survival was. An acknowledgement that the previous 6 months had been miscalculated. Expanding to 11 cities, in hindsight, had been premature. The focus now was on fixing the basics, getting unit economics right, building a healthier foundation, and then maybe growing again. But the turnaround came too late. Inside the offices, morale had already collapsed. Outside, the damage was visible. Brand trust had eroded, investors had lost confidence, and restaurant partners had jumped ship to stronger platforms like Swiggy and Zomato. It was becoming increasingly evident that they had reached the end of the road.
Act 4. The Fade. By May 2016, TinyOwl shut down operations across cities, retaining only Mumbai in a last-ditch effort to hold on to what remained. But they couldn't sustain that either, and just a month later, TinyOwl pivoted by merging with Roadrunner. It was an all-stock deal, forming a new entity called Runner, focused entirely on delivery logistics. In fact, even Runner was eventually acquired by Zomato in 2017. And just like that, TinyOwl had disappeared into the night, occasionally showing up as a cautionary tale to remind us of the lessons it left behind.
So let's take a step back and really look at it. 3 things stand out as the root cause of TinyOwl's downfall. The first, and in my opinion the most important, was what you could call an organizational void. The founding team was sharp, exceptional even, strong on product, strong on intuition. But what was missing was operational maturity. There was no experienced COO, no one who had actually scaled a business of this complexity before. Just 5 engineers trying to build and run a multi-city logistics operation. The young team was starry-eyed and full of vigor to prove themselves and the product they believed in. But the reality of execution hit much harder than expected. And in moments like that, guidance matters, but there wasn't enough of it. Not from within, and not from the outside either. The investors too were pushing for aggressive expansion. And this is not unique to TinyOwl. It's a very common narrative of VC-enabled hypergrowth, which takes me to my next point: scaling without a solid foundation. TinyOwl's collapse resulted from a fundamental mismatch between growth ambition and operational capability. They expanded wide, but not deep enough. And what's more, in a market like India, you will get punished for forgetting that every new city isn't just an expansion. It's a new system, new supply chains, new restaurant relationships, new operational challenges. And TinyOwl was using the same standardized blueprints across all cities. Also, while books teach you that unit economics improve with scale, ground reality, as TinyOwl learned the hard way, may not always comply. Taking me to my final factor, the one that ultimately breaks most companies: financial mismanagement. TinyOwl's expansion was completely unlinked from its unit economics. At one point, they were reportedly operating at nearly 5-to-1 cost-to-revenue ratios, while still expanding into 11 cities. At the same time, marketing spend was aggressive, reported to be over 3 crores a month, without any tracking of the returns it was actually delivering. A lot of that spend went into broad discounting, not targeted growth. If the payback period on customer acquisition costs isn't declining, then throwing more money at the problem isn't the right approach, especially in this sector where customers are typically fickle and looking out for the best discounts. It seemed like TinyOwl treated capital as a growth accelerator rather than a runway enabler. But in the end, TinyOwl didn't just run out of money, it ran out of time to fix what mattered. A year after the shutdown, Harshvardhan Mandad reflected on it with a line that captures the entire journey.
We thought great design could solve delivery, but delivery is boots on ground, not pixels on screen.
Well, in hindsight, the mistakes are easy to map, the decisions easy to question. But in the moment, TinyOwl was doing what every ambitious startup does: moving fast, chasing scale, and trying to win. For future founders and investors, TinyOwl's collapse should inspire a critical question. Is our growth pace matched to our organizational execution capability? When the answer is clearly no, scaling further is not courageous, it's reckless.
And that's your order for the week. No delivery delays, just hard lessons. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on the next one. I'm your host Priyanka, and if you've got an interesting take, insight, or story about a failed startup, we'd love to hear from you. Hit us up on Instagram at theflopside.podcast. Until then, munch on this little tidbit. Between 2013 and 2016, India had over 400 food delivery apps fighting for your dinner. Today, just 2 dominate the table. Thanks for hanging out with us on The Flop Side, where we show you the flip side of flop startups.